headline version of baseball is for everyone. This isn't that. Streak Plot Scout goes below the surface. The 40-man decisions, the prospect ETAs, the draft implications hiding inside yesterday's transactions. Built for the people who understand that the game is won before it's played. Let's get into it. Let's start with what the gap actually tells you. Tomoyuki Sugano is posting a 3.86 ERA against an xERA of 7.52. That is a 3.66 run differential over 53 innings on a rebuilding Colorado Rockies team. Before we discuss what it means, before we get into the 40-man, the contract, the trade implications, or the Statcast underbelly, let's be precise about what this number represents. An ERA to xERA gap of that magnitude is not a hot streak. It is not a pitcher outperforming his stuff through a good month. A 3.66 gap over 53 innings is a statistical anomaly sustained long enough to require a full diagnostic. And when you run the diagnostic, every layer confirms the same finding. This ERA is borrowed. The bill comes due. Here's why this arc is more complicated than a simple regression story, and why the diehard needs to hold the full context before reaching a conclusion. Sugano has historically beaten his xERA. Career average gap sits at approximately negative 1.17, meaning across his professional life, his ERA has consistently run about a run better than the underlying expected metrics. That's meaningful. It's not luck. It reflects something real. His ability to sequence pitches, induce weak contact in critical leverage situations, or hold runners in ways that show up in the ERA but not in the batted ball profile. Some pitchers genuinely have a skill set that produces ERA outperformance at a modest level. Sugano is one of them. The problem is that his current gap of 3.66 runs exceeds even that established baseline by 2.49 runs. If you accept that he legitimately outperforms xERA by 1.17, then the excess beyond that, the portion that is almost certainly variance, BABIP luck, strand rate inflation, and sequencing fortune, is running at roughly 2.49 runs above where he should be. That's the regression exposure. Not the full 3.66, but still a correction that, when it arrives, will push his ERA from 3.86 towards something in the low to mid-fives at a minimum, and potentially higher given the contact quality trends. Let's run through the Statcast profile systematically, because this is where the story is told in full. FIP of 5.54. That's not a number you can explain away. FIP strips out defense and sequencing and isolates what the pitcher himself is responsible for: strikeouts, walks, and home runs. At 5.54, Sugano's FIP is telling you that the ingredients of his performance are producing significantly worse outcomes than his ERA suggests. Hard hit rate against, 47.6%. League average in modern baseball typically runs in the 35 to 38% range. At 47.6, hitters are making hard contact against Sugano at a rate that is substantially above what a durable ERA can withstand. The ERA has not reflected it yet because of strand rate. Runners aren't scoring at the rate the contact quality suggests they should be. That will normalize. Barrel rate against, 16.3%. This is an elevated number. Barrels are the highest damage contact category, the square hits, the ones that produce the most damage. A barrel rate against in that range is consistent with a pitcher who is not missing bats and not inducing weak contact at a meaningful rate. Combined with the 91.1 miles per hour average exit velocity against, the contact profile is uniformly damaging. Chase rate of 25.3%. This is the most diagnostic single number in his arsenal. If hitters are chasing only 25.3% of pitches outside the zone, it means Sugano cannot generate swing and miss equity with his off-speed in the way a pitcher with his profile needs to. His 4.7 K9 confirms it. At just under 5 strikeouts per 9 innings, he's pitching to contact, and the contact is good. His fastball sits at 92.1 miles per hour, down 0.6 from last season. That delta matters. A half-mile-per-hour average velo decline on a pitch that was already below the velocity threshold for swing and miss equity at the big league level is not a physical blip. It's a trend signal. And for a pitcher whose effectiveness was already predicated on deception, sequencing, and location rather than stuff, that half-mile per hour is disproportionately costly. 9 home runs in 53 innings, HR/9 of 1.52. Combine that with the barrel rate and exit velocity, and you see the mechanism clearly. Hitters are squaring up Sugano at an elevated rate, the power contact is translating to home runs, and the ERA has survived this long only because of strand luck and sequencing fortune. WHIP of 1.23 is decent, but not particularly revealing in this context. The 2.5 BB/9 is fine. The problem is not walks. The problem is every ball in play. Now let's turn to the contract in the 40-man picture, because for a rebuilding Colorado Rockies organization, this is where the arc gets strategically interesting. Sugano is in a walk year at $5.1 million AAV. That is a modest number by modern MLB standards. He was signed as an affordable innings eater on a team that was not trying to contend. The Rockies are rebuilding, which changes the calculus entirely around what they should do with a pitcher whose ERA is running 3.66 runs below the contact quality it should be reflecting. The Rockies have $109.4 million in luxury tax space. They are not a financially constrained organization in the immediate sense. They have the capacity to absorb a replacement and to move Sugano if the trade value is real. And right now, the trade value is as real as it's going to get. His ERA of 3.86 is presentable. His 10 starts give a 53-inning sample that is large enough to appear credible to a buyer who is doing only surface-level due diligence. A contender at the trade deadline looking for rotation depth will see a 3.86 ERA on a pitcher with a walk-year contract at $5.1 million and consider it a cheap buy. This is the sell-high window. The window is not infinite. Regression does not wait for a convenient deadline. If Sugano's ERA converges toward his xERA over the next 6 to 8 weeks, which the contact quality numbers strongly suggest it will, his trade value erodes from buy at a modest cost to buy at a discount if you believe in the peripheral upside. That's a different conversation with a different seller's leverage. The Rockies are rebuilding. Their incentive structure is perfectly aligned to move a non-roster piece whose value is at peak precisely because of statistical noise. Selling Sugano at the deadline, or even in June at his ERA number, returns prospect capital or financial flexibility that serves the rebuild. Holding him through August while the ERA normalizes returns nothing except continued service on a walk-year contract that expires anyway. The 40-man implications for the Rockies in this scenario are worth thinking through. Sugano occupies a 40-man slot. If he's moved at the deadline, that slot opens. Colorado's farm is ranked 7th. The Mets are 7th. The Rockies are a separate case. Actually, the Rockies have their own pipeline considerations, and a freed 40-man slot in August or September can be used to protect a prospect from Rule 5 exposure in November. The strategic value of a Sugano trade is therefore not just the prospect return. It's the roster flexibility the slot opens. What to watch in the next 30 days? Watch the ERA. The gap of 3.66 is not sustainable, and the data says it will close. The question is whether it closes before or after the trade deadline. Track Sugano's strand rate specifically. If his LOB percentage starts dropping from whatever inflated number it's currently sitting at toward the league norm, the ERA is moving. Watch whether the Rockies front office makes any public statements about roster flexibility or rebuild timeline. Anything that signals they're open to moving assets. And watch the contact quality in individual starts. A game or two where the strand luck fails and the hard contact turns into a 6-run shellacking will move his ERA faster than gradual regression. When that happens, the sell-high window has effectively closed. This is a finite arbitrage. The Rockies are sitting on a pitcher whose ERA says one thing and whose Statcast profile says something fundamentally different. The gap between those two realities is the trade value. It exists now. It will not exist in 3 months. The story here isn't what Nathan Eovaldi's ERA says. The story is what 15 years of data says about where Nathan Eovaldi is going, and what that means for a Texas Rangers organization trying to remain relevant in the AL West while managing a luxury tax line that's starting to get complicated. Let's establish the stakes first. Eovaldi is in the final year of a deal paying him $25 million annually. That number was defensible when it was signed. He's a veteran arm with a track record, command of multiple pitch types, and enough postseason credibility to justify the premium. But the contract doesn't live in the past. It has to be justified by what's happening right now, and more importantly, by what the underlying numbers say is about to happen. Surface level, this looks fine. ERA of 3.62, 5 quality starts, 28 innings over the last 30 days. If you're a casual observer, you see a veteran doing his job. But this is where the career trajectory becomes the actual story, because the surface and the substrate are diverging in a way that should concern anyone who follows this organization closely. His xERA sits at 4.12 this season. That's not a catastrophic gap. 50 basis points between ERA and xERA is within normal variance, and the 4.12 itself isn't alarming in isolation. But stack it against his FIP of 4.40 and you start to see the shape of what's happening. The ERA is running below where the contact quality and peripheral rates suggest it should be. That gap will close, and historically it closes against the pitcher. His WAR is 0.2 through 54 innings. For a $25 million arm, that is an exceptionally poor return on investment. Now here's where the career arc becomes essential context. Eovaldi's ERA has actually improved over his career. Career average sits around 3.90, and he's been durable enough in healthy stretches to accumulate real value. That's the narrative that justified the contract. But the HR/9 trend tells a different story entirely. Career average of 1.10, last few seasons creeping toward 1.13. This season, he's at 1.66 HR per 9 innings with 10 home runs allowed in just 54 innings. That is not a blip. That is an acceleration of a trend that has been building for several years. And the Statcast contact quality confirms it. 44% hard hit rate against, barrel rate of 7.7%, average exit velocity against of 89.6 miles per hour. His chase rate is sitting at 37.2%, which means hitters aren't chasing nearly enough, and when they do make contact, they're making it well. His fastball is averaging 94.6 miles per hour, which for Eovaldi represents meaningful decline from the peak years when he was sitting 96 to 97, and the pitch had genuine swing and miss equity. At 94.6, that fastball is more hittable, and the contact quality data backs that up. The innings picture adds another layer. He's on pace for significantly fewer innings than his career average, which has historically hovered around 117. Part of that is the current pace, but part of it is the reality that Eovaldi has never been the most durable pitcher across a full season. At 36 years old, entering his age 36 season, the innings compression isn't surprising, but it compounds the value problem. You're paying $25 million for a pitcher who may give you 140 innings on a good year, with underlying metrics that suggest those innings are going to get more expensive as the season progresses. Now let's talk about what this means for the Rangers organization at the roster construction level, because that's where the 90-day picture gets genuinely interesting. Texas is at 60.8% playoff odds. They have AL West ambitions and a legitimate contention window. Their luxury tax space stands at $37.1 million, enough room to be active if necessary, but not unlimited flexibility. Eovaldi's $25 million slot is a significant chunk of that overhead, and the question the front office has to ask in real time is whether that slot is producing at a level that justifies holding it through October. Here's the 40-man implication. Eovaldi is on the 40-man. He's occupying a rotation spot and a roster slot that could theoretically be allocated differently if his performance continues to deteriorate. But this is a walk year. He's not under contract beyond this season. So the Rangers don't have a long-term contract problem. They have a performance problem that's compounding in real time on a single-year commitment. That's actually the best kind of problem to have if you're the front office, because the exit is clean at the end of the season regardless. The real question for the next 90 days is whether Eovaldi's ERA starts converging toward his FIP and xERA, and if it does, what does that mean for the rotation? If his ERA climbs into the 4.40 to 4.80 range, which the underlying numbers suggest is likely as strand rates normalize and the HR9 stays elevated, the Rangers are looking at a legitimate rotation liability in a pennant race. The bullpen usage picture shifts. The decisions about who backs up Eovaldi in long relief become more urgent, and the front office's trade deadline calculus changes, because a rotation spot that was theoretically filled suddenly needs external reinforcement. What to watch in the next 30 days? Track the HR9 closely. If it stays above 1.50 through June, that trend is confirmed for the season. Not a variance pocket, not a bad stretch. Also watch his fastball velocity. If the 94.6 average slips below 94, the pitch shape deteriorates and the contact quality will follow it upward. And watch the Rangers' trade deadline posture as it begins to take form in late June. If they're buying a starter at the deadline, it tells you everything about how they've internally evaluated the Eovaldi situation, regardless of what the ERA line says publicly. This is a 15-year veteran in a walk year on a declining trend. The ERA is flattering him right now, and the clock on that flattery is running out. The Francisco Lindor calf strain is not primarily a Francisco Lindor story. It's a roster architecture story, and inside that architecture, buried in the depth chart and accelerated by circumstance, is a name that the Mets org has been developing quietly for a reason. Let's build the full picture before we get to the prospect piece because the context matters. Lindor goes to the 10-day IL with a strained calf. Severity assessment on calf injuries in baseball is notoriously slippery. A 10-day designation is the minimum, but calf strains in position players, particularly ones involving a player who is already carrying a suboptimal load, as Lindor is this year, have a way of extending. The initial designation reflects the minimum hope. The actual timeline is rarely the minimum. Before we get to the roster implications, let's be clear about where Lindor was when this injury happened. He was not having a good season. WRC plus of 83 means he was producing about 17% below league average at the plate, batting average at .226, 2 home runs, WAR of 0.3 through his starts. His xWOBA of .340 is below the threshold you want to see from an elite offensive shortstop. It's functional, not impactful. His hard hit rate of 43.2% and average exit velocity of 90.9 miles per hour tell you the underlying contact quality isn't terrible, but the production hasn't been there. This is important context because the Mets are at 45.2% playoff odds in the NL East. They're in the conversation, but they're not a comfortable position, and they're playing with a roster that can't absorb a prolonged Lindor absence without real consequence. Now, the roster domino. When a shortstop of Lindor's profile hits the IL, the immediate question is coverage, and the short-term answer is whatever internal option the organization has available at the big league level. That's the bridge. Serviceable, uninspiring, designed to hold the position while the timeline clarifies. The more interesting question, the one that actually matters for the 90-day picture, is what this does to the org's evaluation timeline for Mitch Voit. Voit is ranked 20th in the Mets system, future value grade of 40 by current consensus, with a projected ETA of 2028. That ETA was calibrated against a development arc that assumed Voit would move through the system at a measured pace, A+, AA, AAA, without the external pressure of a big league roster hole accelerating his movement. A calf injury to the everyday shortstop changes that calculus. The grades on Voit are interesting and worth unpacking. He's sitting at A+ right now, which means he's passed the initial professional hurdles, but hasn't been stress tested at the upper levels. His hit tool grades at 45 on the 20/80 scale. That's below average to fringe average. The projection baked into that grade assumes some development, but it also acknowledges real uncertainty about whether the hit tool ever gets to 50, which is the threshold you need to make the bat playable at a big league starting level. The raw power grades at 55, that's above average, and it's the carrying tool in his profile. If the hit tool gets to even 48 or 50, the 55 power plays. If it stagnates at 45, you've got a bat that's marginal at the highest level. The risk designation is medium, which is honest. There's real uncertainty in his profile. He's not a lock. The 2028 ETA reflects a scouting community that sees upside but doesn't want to rush the timeline. Here's the tension. A 10-day IL stint doesn't move Voit. A 30-day IL stint starts conversations. If Lindor's calf strain extends beyond the initial designation, which again, calf strains have a tendency to do, the organization faces a genuine decision about whether to accelerate Voit's assignment to AA or whether to look at other internal options at AAA that are closer to ready but carry lower ceilings. The farm is ranked 7th in baseball. The Mets have real organizational depth. But depth doesn't always mean the right piece is ready at the right time for the right position. Shortstop development is one of the hardest paths in the game because the defensive value at the position is non-negotiable. You can hide a below-average defender at corner outfield or first base, but you can't hide one at short in the National League East. The 40-man implications here are worth tracking. Voit is not currently on the 40-man. At A+ with a 2028 ETA and an FV40 grade, he's not close to 40-man consideration in the normal developmental arc. But the 40-man roster is a living document, and injury situations create the conditions under which the calculus shifts quickly. If the Mets burn through their internal big league options covering Lindor and the injury extends into July, the conversation about whether to protect Voit in the November Rule 5 draft becomes relevant earlier than the org anticipated. The Rule 5 exposure clock runs on service time and roster status, not on development readiness. An org can get forced into a 40-man decision on a player before they're ready to make it, and that decision carries consequences. If you add Voit to protect him, you're carrying a 40-man slot for a player who is 2 or more development years from contributing. If you leave him off and another organization takes a shot at him in the Rule 5 draft, you've lost a piece of your own pipeline. What to watch in the next 30 days? First and most importantly, the Lindor return timeline. If he's back in 12 days and plays regularly through June, Voit's acceleration is a conversation that never fully materializes. But if the calf recurs, and calf injuries in the context of a player already underperforming carry elevated recurrence risk, then the decision point moves into real territory. Watch Voit's performance at A+ over the next 4 to 6 weeks. If he's handling the level, the argument for a AA assignment gets stronger. And watch how the Mets handle the 40-man in the August roster expansion cycle. Who they protect and who they leave exposed will tell you a great deal about how they've internally recalibrated Voit's place in the org hierarchy after this injury. The Mets are a contender in a volatile division with a compromised shortstop situation and a prospect pipeline with real depth but uneven readiness. The next 90 days will test every layer of that architecture. That's the read on the day. Same game, deeper read, back tomorrow. This is Streak Plot Scout. Greatness is never random.